Ethical and Cultural Considerations in Counseling Intersectional Minority Clients by Kelly O'Neill and Talitha Peacock. In this presentation, we will be providing a description of the client, Carla, her current situation, and the presenting concerns which have led her to seek out therapy. We will examine both the strengths and challenges she brings to a therapeutic relationship. We will examine the ethical and cultural concerns presented by her specific case and the positioning which might be appropriate for use as her counselors to adapt. The client is Carla, a 20-year-old college Latina student. Both of her parents are Latino-Latina, but her father passed away when she was a preschooler. Because of this, the client has been influenced more by her mother than her father. She deeply values the familial relationship she has with her extended family, particularly on her mother's side. These include grandparents, aunts, uncles, cousins, and close family friends. She has a strong sense of her role within the family, namely being an obedient child. This is an area in which she feels dissonance between her love and loyalty to her family and the more individualistic values she witnesses in her friends and classmates. She feels pressure to exercise philismo, the closeness and interdependence of family and concern for other members of family's needs before her own. This is difficult for her to negotiate because her needs are only partially met within her family. She has a learning disability as well as mood and eating disorders, which her family does not understand. She feels pressure to rely on them for support, but also feels that the support they offer is inadequate. The typical structure the client's family would have taken was disrupted by her father's death, and her mother has had to take on all the responsibilities which would naturally fall on both parents. This is another area in which the client feels at odds with her culture. The support she witnessed members of her family having from having a father present has been absent from her life. Because she and her mother have relied on each other, their bond with each other is very strong, but she also worries about fulfilling the financial obligations to her mother that her mother expects of her as she ages. Her mother has modern values when it comes to education and employment, but like many Latina women, retains more traditional views regarding issues around sexuality. Carla is heterosexual, but is not currently dating. When she is in a relationship, she feels tension between her cultural values and those that her partner has, as he's often from a different cultural background. She dislikes many aspects of the patriarchal family structure that she has witnessed within Latino culture, but is not entirely sure what her relationship without that structure would look like. The client's mother is deeply religious Catholic, as are most of the members of her extended family. The client's mother also has a strong belief in her fate, fatalismo, a belief that her fate is inescapable, though she manages this anxiety through a strong belief in prayer. The client respects these beliefs to a point, but does not hold them with the same intensity that her mother does. The client is very sensitive to the fact that many Latinos drop out of school. She is aware that she is beating the odds, so to speak, by succeeding in her studies despite her disability. Many of her friends from high school have become mothers at a young age. The client's mother appreciates that Carla has continued in school and has not had children at a young age, and this is a point of connection between them. The client's mother has always been supportive of her education, so some of the challenges surrounding language skills and distrust or misunderstanding of the school system, which can happen in Latino culture, has not been a factor in the client's academic career.
Carla is dyslexic, which has always made schooling difficult. Now in university, Carla knows that she can understand the material, but struggles to process the information from the resources her professors provide. This is a common issue within the university setting for those diagnosed with a learning disability. Although there are support tools available to her, she does not access them as she feels pressured by the typical Western work ethic, one which emphasizes the idea that university should be navigated alone, that the challenges presented are just part of growing up. Furthermore, because of this pressure to go it alone, Carla has yet to disclose her dyslexia diagnosis to anyone but her doctor and her mother. Carla is very aware of the body image expectation perpetuated throughout Western culture. As she utilizes social media, The perfect body ideal is reinforced for her daily. Carla has always felt that she is too curvy. However, over the past 2 years, she has put on considerable weight. That is 60 pounds. She does exercise, but as she works and goes to university, she struggles to find time between being at her job, attending lectures, and doing her homework to work out. Due to little time, when she isn't at home and is feeling hungry, she opts for something quick and easy, like fast food. At home, food has a direct relation to family time. Carla's mother ensures family time by making copious amounts of food for every meal, believing that the more food on the table means more time together. As Carla strongly adopts a need to fulfill her culture's construct of familismo, Carla eats her mother's food in larger than necessary amounts. Carla knows her mother uses a lot of fat when she cooks and has asked that her mother reduce the amount. Her mother replies that she knows that so much fat is bad, but that she is used to a certain lifestyle. In order to maintain familismo, Carla does not want to start making food separate from her mother's, for fear of implying that her mother's cooking is not good enough. Presenting concern. Carla is coming to counseling to seek treatment for her depression, which she says is brought on by her weight gain. She admits that she binge eats. She does this because she knows there is an expectation that she will be a good daughter and eat her mother's food every night when she returns from work or school. As such, Carla only eats a little during the day, leaving herself feeling tired all day long, struggling to get through her classes and any homework she tries to do. She knows that her binge eating does not help her weight issue, but she figures since she does not have that much time or energy to exercise, that it is better than eating nothing or eating too consistently. Carla mentions that her low energy and constant tiredness does not help with her depressive symptoms. She feels unmotivated most of the time. In terms of social supports, she has her mother and her friends, but she has never sought additional help despite her weight bothering her to this extent for some time. She does not mention her father's passing and her dyslexia as causes for her depression. She is able to identify that her father's passing has been difficult and clearly quite the change, but she feels she has been coping with it well. Especially since her mother and extended family are so close-knit, there has been constant support in this regard, even though her mother has needed to take on a dual role within the family. Regarding her dyslexia, she does highlight the struggles she has always had within an academic setting. As counselors, we might question if her struggles with her dyslexia increased upon entering university, causing additional stress that may have triggered the onset of her weight gain and consequently her depression without her realizing.
Strengths and challenges. Carla relies deeply on her mother and her mother's commitment to her success in Carla's academic studies. This has been key to her success in this area and her persistence despite the negative societal bias against her as a Latina. Carla has the broad support of her extended family, which has brought a great deal of support to her life, though it does not negate the effects of discrimination which she has experienced. Carla also demonstrates personal resilience and determination in seeking help for her eating disorder and depression, despite the low levels of participation in mental health services common in the Latino community.
Carla struggles to find her place within the disabled community. As is common for individuals with invisible impairments, she is often faced with frustration and resentment from people in school and at work who think she is lethargic or who believe her disability is lesser since her body is still physically able. Within the disabled community, she finds that those who are more disabled sometimes judge her when she says she is also living with a disability, believing that they are considering her to be a baby or silly for thinking dyslexia is a disability, considering all the things she's still able to do. Carla feels unaccepted by the dominant Caucasian population because of her weight, leaving her feeling self-conscious and unwanted. She has often considered that her larger body makes her physically and sexually unattractive. people often commenting that she is just lazy, all common stereotypes of individuals who are prejudiced by weight bias. Research has demonstrated that weight bias can lead to decreased motivation to engage in physical activity and also increase binge eating behavior, two behaviors Carla has identified for herself. Research has also highlighted that weight bias can lead to depression. For Carla, this was unfortunately the case. Sometimes, Carla wonders if her weight is why she is single. She recognizes that within a predominantly white society, that her body type is not idealized, and so ruminates on how this impacts her ability to find a partner. Carla's depression seeps into all areas of her life. She feels unenthused to do most anything, but pushes through unsupported, her greatest motivation being the financial responsibility she feels to her mother. Carla is worried about talking about her depression because, despite her mother's more modern views, Carla does recognize the stigma of mental illness within her culture. Like many Latinos, she is aware that when some members of her community think of mental illness, they only think crazy. She is worried about the social discrimination and embarrassment she may face if people within her Latino community find out about her mental health struggles. Much like her weight, Carla contemplates how her racial identity puts her at odds with the dominant Caucasian culture. She wonders how often her race has been a barrier to her successes, be it scholastic, work-related, or in relationships. She thinks about how her Latina identity may not be appealing to the majority culture. Although she has never been victim to any sort of racial aggression or insult, she nonetheless considers the stereotypes people may have of her. Carla considers this the most when she reflects on her social circles. Although she has had, and currently has, friends of other races, all of her closest friends are members of her Latino community. As a member of more than one minority, Carla feels as though she does not fit within any community completely. She either feels she is judged by the dominant Caucasian community because she is Latina and because of her weight, discriminated against by the disabled community because she is not that hard done by, or fears she will be marginalized by her Latino community because of her depression. Ultimately, Carla asks herself, where do I belong?
Ethical and cultural considerations. There are several ethical and cultural considerations we would take into account in counseling a client like Carla. First would be to avoid a colonizing attitude as her counselors. This might happen if we took an overly aggressive countering approach or challenged her on biased beliefs she may hold about herself. Since as white counselors, this approach might be perceived by Carla as oppressive. In this case, Carla may feel the need to react against our approach rather than enter into a collaborative relationship with us. We would likely be better to adapt a collaborative approach and structure the therapy as client-led exercise. If we focus on re-educating Carla about her experiences and define them for her as a member of a minority, we may be reenacting the very colonizing attitude we are seeking to replace. A countering approach might be more appropriate if it was being used by a therapist who is also a member of a minority. But as white therapists, it would be incumbent upon us to be sensitive in this area. A second ethical consideration is that the Canadian Psychological Association clearly lays out the expectation that a counselor will examine their own biases by evaluating how their unique experiences and social location might have influenced their thinking, understanding that this may impact their ability to be objective. It is critical that as counselors we understand the client's experience and social location may lead them to a very different perspective than we possess. As counselors working with Carla, we should also consider cultural values held by her and her community, such as feliismo, the closeness and interdependence of family, and concern for other members of the family's needs. Another key cultural belief is fatalismo, the belief in fate and the inevitability of a particular outcome. Though Carla may not hold to these beliefs as closely as her mother does, they continue to impact her cognitive patterns and may even prove, in the case of familismo, to be an adaptive strategy to help deal with her mental health concerns. In the case of fatalismo, this belief may undermine her sense of personal agency, and as her counselors, we would need to be sensitive to this possibility.
As white counselors working with Carla, we need to be aware of her multiple identities, how they interact, and how she may react to a white therapist. First and foremost, we need to be aware of the difference in social location and the fact that Carla may not feel comfortable disclosing private information to a member of the dominant group. As there are cultural differences between us in customs, mindsets, and beliefs, Carla might feel like we will not understand her and so may not feel comfortable sharing. As she has experienced discrimination and judgment by Caucasian culture in other areas of her life, she may feel this could happen again, given the intimate and vulnerable position presented in a counseling setting. Regarding her dyslexia, the presence of a disability may spark errors on our part. First, errors of omission may be made. We may fail to ask questions about critical aspects of Carla's life because we assume that an issue is unimportant owing to the presence of her disability. For example, although she is seeking counseling for depression caused by weight gain, we might assume that Carla's depression actually stems from her dyslexia, a factor that cannot be changed, unlike her weight. Second, errors of commission may occur. As counselors, we might make the unjustified assumption that certain issues should be important because of her dyslexia, when in fact they are not important issues for Carla. We might think that personal problems faced by Carla result from her disability, and as such, career and academic counseling may become a focus, even when it is not what Carla wants to discuss. As alluded to in an earlier slide, we might believe that her depression was actually sparked by the struggles Carla faced starting university as a person living with dyslexia. We might consider what Carla wants to focus on, her depression, regardless of what we may believe to be the underlying cause of her symptoms. We also need to contemplate that Carla may not feel comfortable addressing her disability with people she perceives as abled. Again, she might think that since we do not understand, we cannot help her. When considering her weight, we already know that Carla feels unaccepted by the dominant Caucasian culture. We need to remember that her perspective around food is largely controlled by her duty to familismo, and so need to be aware that there are strongly reinforced cultural constructs that play into her eating habits. An important question in working with Carla will be, how do we encourage Carla to do what she wants to do, that is, eat healthier and lose weight, while still respecting the cultural reasons for why she eats the way she does? Delivering this message to Carla may be challenging. As members of the dominant culture, one that reinforces weight bias, how do we, as Caucasian, average weight counselors, deliver guidance around healthy choices without perpetuating and reinforcing societal standards Carla already feels oppress her?
Counselor positioning. A counselor working with Carla would have to strive for a culturally sensitive approach, which would take into account the specific ways in which she experiences inequity and oppression. As Almeida, Hernandez-Wolf, and Tubb explain, cultural equity addresses the multiplicity of personal, social, and institutional locations that frame identities in the therapeutic practice by locating these complexities within a societal matrix that shapes relationships, power, privilege, and oppression. As Carla's counselors, we need to understand the ways in which power, privilege, and oppression have played out in her life and impacted her intersecting identities. As a member of the Latino community, Carla experiences prejudice and bias against her related to her physical appearance, her educational outcomes, her mental health concerns, and her eating disorder. The extent to which these experiences hold salience for her is something a counselor should be open to her sharing without making assumptions about her experience. Children of Latino immigrants tend to exhibit a greater degree of familismo when their parents experience higher levels of discrimination. This discrimination has also been shown to be linked to higher levels of depressive symptoms in the children, though not in the parents. Familismo can be a very important source of support for the children who are combating depressive symptoms and can improve mental health, although it does not mitigate the effects of discrimination. As a counselor, it would be important to recognize the importance to Carla of her sense of belonging and place within her family. She already feels that they do not fully understand her mental health challenges, which make her feel alienated from them at times. By recognizing the importance of this support system and encouraging her to maintain these relationships, a counselor may be able to help her to access the support she needs from both her family and professional counseling services. A multiculturally sensitive approach would see the value available to the client from both sources, rather than valuing one over the other or dismissing the family's contribution as unimportant. This approach also recognizes the extent to which the discrimination the client experiences are beyond the ability of her family support system to counterbalance, and sees the need for broader societal change. The fact that Carla has come to therapy speaks highly of her determination to use any resource at her disposal to deal with her depression and eating disorder. Within the Latino culture, there is a disparity between mental health needs and concerns and the utilization of these services. This has been found to be connected to the concept of fatalismo, a belief in fate that exhibits similarly to external locus of control, or a lack of control over life situations, and both depression and underutilization of mental health services. Researchers suggest that the feeling of lack of control over life situations compounds the client's feelings of helplessness when confronted by negative life events and results in depression being of deeper and more lasting intensity. As Carla's counselor, it would be important to recognize that this belief, whether Carla holds it consciously or not, may play into her depression and eating disorders. These beliefs may also be reinforced by her mother, who does subscribe to this perspective. Carla may need to be encouraged by her counselor to challenge feelings of external locus of control and recognize the ways in which she can and does exhibit agency in her own life, perhaps through a collaborative approach. If we were to use a critically informed practice in working with Carla, we would be seeking to not only understand, but challenge and ultimately change society. This approach is concerned with challenging injustice and does so directly. It seeks to raise the awareness of the client to the injustice they may be experiencing. In Carla's case, this would involve us as counselors challenging her acceptance of Western standards of beauty and urging her to reject them and see herself as beautiful as she is. We might also reject the term disability with the attached lack of agency and urge Carla to focus on her resilience and strength. We might as well encourage her to notice ways in which Western society devalues people of color. Another possible perspective is postmodern, which emphasizes the many different views, possibilities, and lives. In this case, we would be concerned with creating a relationship with Carla, which would allow for mutual learning and is relational and collaborative. This perspective would allow Carla to share her unique perspective without experiencing criticism for it. In this case, we would allow Carla to express her feelings regarding her weight, disability, and ethnicity without challenging her perception of her own experience.
Counselor positioning continued. When approaching Carla's dyslexia, we will need to take a comprehensive and unbiased approach. Not only does this include being aware of errors of omission and commission, it also means being mindful of our own biases. It will be important for us to ask Carla about her dyslexia, but only to determine whether it is a concern for Carla, or if she feels it adds to her presenting problem. In doing so, we can address the disability directly. Most importantly, we must not succumb to the spread phenomenon that is common with disabilities. That is, the belief that the disability encompasses unrelated aspects of Carla's life. As counselors, we need to acknowledge this part of Carla's identity in order to provide a holistic approach to helping Carla, but we must respect the degree of importance she places on addressing her dyslexia. If Carla chooses to discuss her dyslexia further, it may be best to approach it from the minority model. The minority model views disability as an external problem, involving an environment that is filled with negative societal attitudes that fails to accommodate the needs of individuals living with disabilities. This perspective emphasizes the oppression and discrimination encountered by those living with a disability, experiences very similar to those of other minority groups. As these are feelings Carla has expressed as a consequence of her other cultural identities, she may identify best with this approach and feel like she is really being understood. With the minority model, we can emphasize how society's attitudes play a large role in the problems she faces because of her dyslexia, and we can focus on potential supports for maximizing her potential, especially at school. The emphasis on self-empowerment and self-advocacy could help immunize Carla against prejudices and discrimination while helping to protect her self-esteem. We also need to be mindful of the language we use. In addressing her dyslexia, we should be referring to her as a person living with a disability and not a disabled person. This puts the focus on Carla rather than her limitation. We also want to be sure not to use phrases that evoke pity or non-functional status, such as suffering from. Lastly, we will want to respond to Carla according to her skills, personality, and other attributes, again making sure we are not assuming that her dyslexia is a primary concern. Counselor positioning continued. When positioning ourselves in relation to addressing Carla's weight, beyond reflecting on our own biases, we need to consider Carla's social and environmental position. Despite the fact that more than 1 billion adults are overweight, few appear to make use of professional help for weight management as a consequence of lack of referral, lack of time, financial costs, and personal preference. We know Carla A does not have a lot of time, B is a student and has a financial responsibility to her mother, so likely does not have a lot of extra money, and C, that her Latino community does not have the greatest outlook on mental health, and despite her weight making her depressed, has put off seeking help until now. We also need to consider what sort of resources surround Carla. Some other considerations we will need to keep in mind are whether or not she has access to a gym, or if she can even afford to attend a gym as much as she would like. Does Carla have the financial cushion to spend money on fresh produce or healthier ingredients? What other resources does Carla have access to that could help in her weight loss while not being a financial burden? Does Carla feel like she will be supported in these pursuits? Social support leads us to the next positioning consideration. How do we balance catering to the cultural implications of her relationship with food while also helping her pursue her goal of weight loss? As a member of the dominant culture, Carla may assume that we will never understand the focus her culture places on food and how it ties into family. In demonstrating cultural humility and asking Carla to expand on this idea, we present Carla an opportunity to voice her conflict while providing us a chance to validate Carla's experiences. In asking Carla to explain her culture's relationship with food, we are not dismissing her Latina identity or giving her the impression that her reasoning is simply an excuse for her weight gain. Because we ideally want to find a balance between Carla maintaining feminismo and Carla having a positive self-image, we will need to consider approaches that allow her to partake in each goal. In approaching Carla from this position, we demonstrate that we respect both of her wants, despite the challenges that engaging in both may present. For example, trying to eliminate unnecessary fat from her diet when we know her mother cooks with a lot of fat. Lastly, it will be important for us to be mindful of thin privilege. Similar to how we belong to the visible majority culture, as counselors, we also belong to the acceptable weight culture by societal standards. In counseling Carla, we need to consider that Carla may not feel comfortable discussing her weight with people she perceives as oppressors, as the world does not discriminate against us for being a healthy weight. All factors considered, it may be best to place ourselves in an intersectional and social determinant position. The intersectional perspective considers interactions of multiple forms of oppression and the outcomes these interactions have on weight. This perspective has allowed for further understanding of the effects that weight bias has on social equality when considering gender, race, and socioeconomic status. From the non-centric weight perspective, weight bias and its intersections have been described as subscribing to oppressive social contexts for those with larger bodies, implying that larger bodies are visual representations for immorality. The social determinant position considers factors such as non-dominant racial and/or ethnic background and being female as factors for increased obesity. Additionally, proponents of the social determinant position assert that living in neighborhoods with lower density recreational facilities and supermarkets, along with decreased access to fair-priced healthy products and decreased walkability, also pose as potentials for increased weight gain.
Conclusion. In assessing an appropriate counselor positioning with a client such as Carla, we believe that we must first be sensitive to the multicultural environment in which Carla lives. This may impact perceived power dynamics between us as the counselor and Carla, as well as our ability to establish a working alliance with her. But we feel that as white therapists, this would be most effectively accomplished through a postmodern and collaborative approach, where she is able to share her experiences, challenges, and concerns in her preferred manner. This allows us to avoid an unhealthy or imbalanced power relationship with her. This is especially important with Carla because of the impact of the belief of fatalismo on her sense of internal-external locus of control.
In regard to her disability, we should inquire about her dyslexia only to the extent that is necessary to treat her depression. If Carla tells us that her dyslexia is not a presenting concern or trigger for her depression, then not addressing her dyslexia in counseling will be most effective for Carla. If we choose to address her dyslexia even though Carla has expressed that she does not want to discuss it, she may feel we are misattributing her depression, are not actually listening to her when she discusses her concerns, and that we are assuming an expert role in which we know best. Therefore, not addressing her disability until she is ready is the best action moving forward. Since Carla believes her weight gain is brought on by her depression, it would be best to implement strategies that help with her self-perception and behaviors around her weight, while still being able to enjoy her mother's cooking. As such, a mindfulness-based approach to eating awareness may help Carla to balance her cultural and personal desires. In utilizing a mindfulness-based approach, Carla would hopefully be able to improve her control over her eating while decreasing the anxiety and depressive symptoms around her eating behaviors. In providing Carla with tools she can utilize to control her own eating behavior and self-image, she may feel the impact of fatalismo decrease, as her locus of control would be internal as opposed to external.